Is on the stage. She's a former president of the Businesswomen's Association of South Africa, introducing the president of the Republic, President Cyril Ramaphosa. It's at the Businesswomen's Association Presidential Dialogue 2019. The dialogue is going to be streamed across multiple media platforms to allow full participation of women across the country. And I asked you earlier, are you a businesswoman? Do you feel that government is giving you sufficient support in your efforts to grow the South African economy? Let us know at the agenda_SABC. Let's go there live.
As a socio-economic matter and indeed as a political matter, we're here today because we believe you, Mr. President. We believe in you as well. We believe that you'll be able to take us to the next level, leading us to be what we want to become in the next 25 years. 25 years into our democracy, we still live in a country where gender-based violence is a norm. Mr. President, South Africa is at war with its women. Talk to us about your plans. You have absolutely made decisive pronouncements and intentions in this regard. The improvement of economic power of women, the enhancement of legal and policy frameworks, and redirecting funds to improve and ensure adequate care, support, and healing for victims of gender-based violence. But South Africa is still a violent and deeply wounded country, and looking at the gender global statistics, Mr. President, we have one of the highest rates of gender-based violence in the world, which is actually 5 times the global average. Unemployment, Mr. President, of our youth and women is at an alarming rate. The racial disparity in the unemployment rate is also equally alarming. As a BWA, we do a census every year, Mr. President, where we track the upward mobility of women in corporate South Africa. And the last census we conducted in 2017 is still disheartening. We sit with CEOs and chairmen of JSE-listed companies at only 11%. We sit with women in directorships at 21%. We also sit with women in executive management at only 29%. And it cannot be that in 2019, 25 years into our democracy, those are the numbers, when we make up more than half of our population, a talent pool that if is drawn from, we can certainly be able to turn our GDP around. Mr. President, our dialogue and our invitation as a Businesswomen's Association is one that wants to partner with you, to walk with you, to work with you. Ute, Mr. President, tuma mina. Si ready, Mr. President. Situme, Mr. President. But we need to hear from you as our leader of this beautiful nation, what the plans are. We need to understand your vision, your decisive action, and more importantly, what we, as Abafazi Imbokodo, can do to work with you to make this beautiful nation brighter and greater. I honor you and I thank you, my past presidents, who serve the organizations selflessly. It's a thankless job. We've done our national duty over the last couple of years to make sure that this organization stands up for what is important, and that is the emancipation and the economic emancipation of women in this country. There were leaders and winners of this prestigious award, which include Bomama Marina Maponya, Pam Goldings, Vaus Tandindlovu, may her soul rest in peace, former winners of the Businesswomen's Association Awards. This is an organization that celebrates excellence. This organization has changed the trajectory of many lives. And this morning, sir, we thank you for honoring our invitation. As we dialogue with us as a nation, as we are streaming this conversation live across the nation. I now hand you over to Dr. Namane Mahau, my Shiro, my mother, my mentor, and my friend, to welcome the President.
Thank you, Vasi. Vasi. This is a special day. Honorable President, our comrade, Matamela Ramaphosa, the women in this hall are delighted to have you as their guest. And also, the women in this hall are delighted to have you Minister of Women. We have a Minister of Women who's committed to empowerment of women. And in the presidency, not many countries have that, and our president has made it a point that we have Minister Maite Nkwana Mashabane in the presidency to drive the women's agenda and also to take care of our people with disabilities and also the youth. Mr. President, we are here because the women of our country have come to realize that our president has brought a light and said that women shall be at the center of economic development and growth in this country. Isn't it? And that, Mr. President, has raised the hopes and the excitement of these women. Our country has been committed to issues of women empowerment and has gone for years developing frameworks and ensuring that our universities, as we are aware now, we have even more women than men qualifying from our universities. That is what our democracy has given us. With regard to policies of women, and as Basetsana Kumalo, this beautiful and brilliant woman, who's an outstanding businesswoman and author, who devotes time to development of others, including Kunya, who works so hard to make sure that Businesswomen's Association stays active so that women can continue to grow. These are women who look at the policies that are coming up and say what needs to be done for women to find a place, and so that women's economic activities can grow. Mr. President, I wanted to share something with you about BWA that people do not know, and they just say, oh, it's just one of those women's associations. For me, BWA is an association that allowed me an opportunity to touch the soul and the hearts of the women of this country across race and across levels of development. Mr. President, this is an organization that initially was led by white women from the past. And they opened their doors and brought in women of color, black women. And over the years, black women took over and became presidents of the association. And together they focus on critical aspects that would promote and advance the growth and development of women. We also have Boni Dibate, who was our first president of Businesswomen's Association, with us seated over there. It is these women that also make the time to make sure that we support others. Having said that, we are now at a phase where After all, we've got women graduating, but then in some areas, we are concerned, Mr. President, that even when women are graduating in universities, in certain sectors, they are not being promoted. The statistics as indicated by Basi in terms of women CEOs, and when we introduced the census, we initiated it as a weapon to fight for women, because you can't fight it without the numbers. So we had to make sure we had the numbers. And we compared South Africa with the US and Canada and Australia, and said, South Africa, look at where you stand in relation to the world. And when we did that, private sector was willing to listen. That time we partnered with JSE, and JSE has again come back to the fold to partner with International Women's Forum of South Africa. And as BWA, we are also going to support them to ensure that this agenda of women empowerment continues. Women-owned enterprises. We'll all agree that as much as it's important to focus on the promotion of women, because we have got to keep our eyes on that, women-owned enterprises are very, very important. Very crucial, and particularly now as we are talking about inter-Africa trade, collaborating with and partnering with other countries, we have been privileged. And I would like to acknowledge here with us today a friend and a colleague, the chief representatives of UN in the country, Nados Begele Thomas, who has worked with us for years with UN Women, including also with Ayanda running the program, providing support on research on the status of women in this country. And in the past few years, focusing more on women and how women can be incorporated and participate more in public procurement so that they can grow their enterprises and become more competitive. It is therefore exciting that at this moment, when government is saying we are now looking more closely at how we can enable this integration of women-owned enterprises in public procurement. And we will also be working with private sector to come in as well to say, how can we enhance participation of enterprises so that the enterprises can grow? We know that women-owned enterprises generate a lot of jobs and also for more women. So extending participation of women in economic activities requires the participation of women. And in a sense, Mr. President, we have arrived because we've got a president who has come to acknowledge that women are central in the economy. And we cannot move forward unless women are part of the process. And this engagement is about how can we join hands in moving this forward. The challenges are many, but if we keep at it in partnership with private sector and NGOs and communities, and also give special attention to women in rural areas as well as in urban areas, we will move forward. I thank you.
Thank you very much to both our previous speakers, the former presidents of the Businesswomen Association of South Africa, for giving us their insight and, of course, welcoming us here today. Before I do take my seat to engage in our dialogue with the president, I do want to remind you of some of the feedback that we are receiving on social media. A few moments to go before we do start trending, but of course that can only happen with your ongoing active participation. So a reminder of the official hashtags to use: hashtag BWSA Presidential Dialogue, hashtag presidential dialogue. Of course, tag His Excellency himself at Cyril Ramaphosa. And of course, you can also tag at BWSA Events, which is also on social media, to provide you with further insight as well. We do understand many of you have connected to the Wi-Fi. For those of you who are still looking for the password, the official network to log on to is BWASA, and the password BWASA 2019. Same acronym, just 2019 added to the end. With that said, the podium has been removed. I've been directed to take my seat, and the conversation will certainly kick off this morning with His Excellency. Mr. President, thank you so much for your time in acknowledging the women who are keen to participate and be partners in your efforts to really drive economic participation in the economy. Thank you once more for your time today.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I'd like us to actually start by setting the scene regarding the economy itself, because before we can ask for women to participate, there needs to be a sector and an economy for us to actually participate in. It's well documented that this week actually happens to be one of the most critical weeks on the economic calendar for South Africa. Tomorrow, the midterm budget policy review by the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni, will be delivered. Following that, we've also got a printing of key unemployment data in South Africa, which we know remains at all-time highs within our economy. And following that, the international market perceptions. Moody's giving us an update with regard to our outlook at the end of this week by Friday. All of these are very critical matters, and you yourself have been endeavoring to really drive a change in a sense of optimism regarding South Africa's economy at the moment. I know that the Minister of Finance will be addressing the economic landscape, but I do want us to get a sense and understanding from your point of view, Mr. President, regarding the current economic climate in South Africa, where the opportunities lie, and just exactly how best we need to be gearing ourselves to unlock so much more potential.
Well, thank you very much. Let me start off by appreciating this moment and expressing gratitude for having been honored to come and participate in this dialogue with a galaxy of women who are so dynamic, so effective, successful, beautiful. Yes, beautiful, please. And you're entitled to applaud yourselves because the women of South Africa are really, truly beautiful. And we should thank Providence for that. But women who are also innovative. So it's a real privilege and an honor to be here. We are living in challenging times, and my general approach is to look more on the positive side of things rather than on the negative side of things. When we face challenges, I always say we need to look out for opportunities. That's what I often say also to our colleagues in cabinet. Minister Maite Nkwana Mashabane is here, and we are also honored to have the UN representative here in South Africa gracing this occasion as well. So in many ways, this occasion has gone global. So we are grateful for that. So looking on more of the positive side is to see the extent to which out of the challenges we face, we should not extract what can work best for our country and what can infuse confidence. And I think there's a lot that can infuse confidence. The mere holding of this dialogue, having so many women who are businesswomen who want to move forward and grab opportunities that are out there, for me, infuses confidence, because we are dealing with what I would call an active citizenry of women who no longer want to sit back and wait for handouts from government or whatever, or from men who are saying, we are here, we are women, we are South African women of all races, and we have arrived. Whether you like it or not, hey, South Africa, wake up. The women of South Africa are here. And that is what puts you here. So for starters, that gives me confidence that the women of our country are no longer like our grandmothers, and all of us will remember how our grandmothers were. Our grandmothers sat back and allowed the men to do all the work, the fighting and so on. The women of our country today are saying, we are surging forward, we are equal, and we want to be treated equally. And what you have in your hand is the constitution of our country which empowers you. And I say, take that instrument, utilize it so that it empowers you even more. But getting back to your question, our economy is facing challenges, granted. We need to look out for opportunities that are there for women. And obviously, in order to drive the economy forward, we as government must make sure that we adopt policies, processes, structures that are going to enable the women of our country to grasp the opportunities that are out there. And for quite a long time, we've been informed, and we know this, that some of our policies are not being well executed. Mm-hmm. We've got structures that are not friendly to advancing the causes of women, and we are not implementing some of the decisions that we have taken. Now, I am here to listen. I'm here to listen to some of the issues that are constraints, impediments for the empowerment of women. Having initially said, and as our colleague said in the beginning, I am irrevocably committed to the empowerment of women, and I will never turn back from that. I do that for a number of reasons. I have three daughters, and those daughters need to be empowered. They've got to have a sense that this country supports them, and I want to see them fully empowered and supported, because women in our country often, live under a number of constraints. Many of them, because they are black, they are held back. Many of them, because they are women. All of you are always held back, and some are held back because of their class position. Now we need to take out all those shackles, empower women, and make sure that they have their rightful place in the life of this country. So I'm irrevocably committed and am prepared to do anything and everything that will advance the cause of women. That is what I am committed to, and I want to hear what you have to say.
Mr. President, I'd like to jump in on that note.
Yes.
Doing anything and completely committed does certainly speak to making those commitments publicly available and understanding the policies, procedures, and steps and measures that you've alluded to in place to ensure that we see the advancement of women. Give us some insight with regard to how exactly are we reviewing certain policies and, of course, opening up the dynamics with regard to education, access to finance, and, of course, the safety of women within South Africa, and if there is a multi-pronged approach from the various ministries to address several of these matters?
Well, let me start off with the painful one, which is the safety of women, because we've had to deal with this in the recent past. And as my sister said here at the podium, that this is a country, we're living in a country that has declared war on its women. And that is something that we've got to address and address effectively. And I've made it a point that I'll continue spreading the message, I'll continue talking about gender-based violence, that we've got to rid our country of the scourge of gender-based violence. And we've also got to ensure that we empower the women of our country. We've got to make sure that we set up all the processes, structures, and everything that are going to enhance the safety of women. And that if they've been subjected to these terrible acts of violence, there needs to be a system that is going to support them, that is going to make sure that they are well treated from the time it occurs in the police station, in the Tutuzela centers and all that. The Tutuzela centers are serving a very, very good purpose, and we want to spread many more of them. We've got to retrain our police to make sure that whenever any woman is raped, abused in whatever way, they are properly treated, and there are places in police stations where they are properly interviewed and cared for, and the Tutizela centers are also properly equipped with resources and human beings who will be able to take care of the women. So safety of women in our country is important. That takes us to dealing with crime. We've got to have a South Africa where women can be able to walk around at midnight without fearing that they are going to be attacked and without fearing that they are going to be raped by anyone. So safety for me plays a very key role, and we are going to continue improving that. When it comes to education, the pleasing thing now that's evolving in our country is that we're finding that our schools, our universities have more and more women. And that for us is actually a silent revolution underway. Our universities, our colleges have more women than men. So that is a huge plus. At the economic level, we've got to set up a number of processes to make sure that women are empowered. But at cabinet level, at government level, we've taken a decision that the budgeting process in our government is now going to be gender sensitive. Mm-hmm. We're going to ensure that when we do budgets, the budgets are going to be focusing on the gender aspect of how we empower women. And to this end, as we're now going to be signing, I'm going to be signing agreements with all the ministers. And one of the important elements of those agreements is going to be, what is it that you are going to do to empower the women of our country through the programs that are embedded in your portfolio? Mm-hmm. So that, to me, is a very powerful way.
And it does speak to a very pertinent issue that many of the audience members hope to have addressed here, Mr. President. And if we can perhaps just engage with the audience to get an understanding as to how many of you here in the room actually do business with government and have been able to procure or provide your services through the procurement options available through government. By show of hands, of you who have raised your hands, how many of you have been met with frustrations of the red tape involved within those particular systems?
So red tape.
That's indicative. Okay. Exactly. And that does certainly speak to opening up the measures and opportunities for more female-owned businesses to do business with government. Aside from allocating a little bit more capital, Mr. President, yes, what about development and, of course, spearheading not just capital that's deployed to existing businesses, but the development of smaller businesses who can also partner and come on board?
That's one of the areas that we want and are going to be focusing on, to help the development of women-led businesses. There are statistics that show that the women-led businesses are growing by leaps and bounds, but they are still minuscule against the larger scheme of businesses that are led by men. And we've got to increase that, and we've got to bring more and more women into business, help them through either incubation processes, help them through other empowerment processes. I'm delighted that the NYDA, for instance, is focusing more and more on young women-led businesses. And they are helping to fund, they are helping to train, and that is what we are going to be focusing on. And we now, beginning to have a bias, a real clear and definite bias on women-led businesses. That is what I would like to promote more and more, and ask, is this a women-led business? And of course, maybe discriminate in favor, not discriminate against men, yes, but discriminate in favor of women-led businesses. Isn't that nice?
Certainly welcome.
Yes.
Certainly welcome. And also speaks to another element, Mr. President, that we know that you have been endeavoring on, which is access to markets.
Yes,
you recently returned from Russia discussing enhancing relationship ties with Russia as well as some of our other counterparts on the continent. We also have several investment conferences which are also coming up. And this also speaks to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which Dr. Namane also referred to. Access to markets is also pertinent, not only for female business leaders to do business with government and other businesses, but also within other countries and operations. How high of a priority do you make access to markets for female-owned businesses with their peers across the continent and even across the globe that you get to engage with?
Well, my starting point there is we need to have more and more women-led businesses in manufacturing. Because the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement is really going to open enormous opportunities. And as it opens opportunities, they should not just be opportunities we speak about. There should be opportunities for trading goods that should be sold, and those products need to be made. So my emphasis then is that in the manufacturing space, we need to see more and more women. And I'd like to also say that, sometimes when we travel, and I've often insisted that when we travel, either on a state visit, I often want to precede that visit in that country we go to with a business forum, where we bring businesses of our own country and businesses of the local country together. Now, I'd like to see more and more women-led businesses from South Africa traveling with me, going to those countries where we are going to be signing agreements with various presidents in other countries. Women must be there. They must be seen, they must be heard, and they must participate with others. They must be there to trade their goods. So that once we have those forums, they move from contact to contract. And I want to see a galaxy of women, like what I'm seeing here, in those types of forums, where women demonstrate their capability, their know-how, and their innovative nature. So we want to open markets for women-led businesses in our country so that they can trade. And we, at government level, want to empower them more and more. And we call upon the private sector to also open up spaces for women-led businesses, because it is the big companies that must support the medium, small enterprises. And I want to make a call and continue to make a call on the business community to give women-led businesses great opportunities to get into that space, because women-led businesses are often much more productive, they're much more hardworking, they are more innovative, they are more courageous, they are much more productive than others. I won't name the others.
Some might say you're preaching to the choir if you could hear the agreement within the audience here, Mr. President. But I do want to challenge some of those outcomes, because many of these initiatives have been tried before. Yeah. Policies have been written, and even several trade missions also established to ensure that women businesses do participate. But unfortunately, along the way, a lack of accountability tends to come in, and malfeasance and lack of leadership also does occur, including financial leakages that also take place in this regard. How are we going to make sure that those trade missions that you call on, how do we ensure that the additional partners within the private sector and civil society are going to be held accountable to see and act measurable outcomes in future?
Well, this is where this Businesswomen's Association then comes in. And this is where various other entities and organizations come in. And this is where the leaders of business women's companies come in. Because, as they say, if you sit in a corner, how are you going to get it? Yes. So we've got to get to a point, because this is a struggle. A struggle was never fought and won by people just sitting in a corner. We have now entered a new struggle where we've got to empower the women of our country. Don't see it as a Sunday picnic where we sit in the park and have, wine and have a braai. This is a struggle. There's going to be resistance and obstacles along the way, and we've got to jump hoops and loops to get to where we want to go. So the struggle is not won yet. Even as our strategic objective is to have a non-racial, a non-sexist, a democratic, and a prosperous South Africa, those 4 strategic objectives still have to be won. What we achieved in 1994 was a breakthrough. It gave us a platform to be able to tackle all these important struggles. We still have to ensure that South Africa becomes a truly non-racist country. Yes. There is still racism. There are huge pockets of racism. We've got to fight against that. But for me, the most important one is the non-sexist South Africa that we want to achieve. There's still much work that needs to be done. So we've got to ensure that we do it. I mean, part of the process is making sure that women are well represented in decision-making structures. Now, our parliament is beginning to resemble the type of parliament that we would want. We've got more women represented. In the governing party that I lead, every structure now, and Minister Maite Nkwana Mashabane and them made sure that every structure that we have in the governing party is a 50-50 structure. And in some cases, we even have slightly more women and all that. We've got to make sure that in the corporate world, the management, as my sister Masistana was saying, is still lagging behind. In the boardroom, we're still lagging behind. Is that a struggle that must be fought? My answer is yes. Am I going to support you in that struggle? My answer is yes. I'm going to join you in that struggle to make sure that we win that struggle and have boards, management teams, and every other aspect of decision-making structure in South Africa, an equalized structure where gender parity is the order of the day.
Indeed, and attained within our lifetime and for the benefit of
within our lifetime. I'm 67 now, and within my life, I've got maybe 20 more years to go. Within 20 years, it must be done.
I'm sure you have a lot more, Mr. President. In a moment, we will cross to the audience just to gauge some of their views and share some of their questions that they do want to have with us. But, Mr. President, you're known for your tagline, Tumamina.
Yes, ma'am.
As the former president of Businesswomen Association alluded to. And we also want to understand how you want to send us into the world to make a change with regard to gender parity. None of this can really take place without pure and true collaboration between members of the public and members of the private sector. You often are told as a leader that you need to create an enabling environment in order for the private sector to unleash and unlock new economic opportunities. But what is it that you, as government, request of the private sector in order to walk the talk and meet you halfway with regard to this objective?
Well, you know, the private sector, and I keep calling on the private sector to open opportunities for women and young people, young women as well. Open up opportunities in the form of employment, in the form of job opportunities to prepare young people for work, and businesses to ensure that they procure from women-led businesses, they empower and strengthen those businesses, they incubate those businesses and all that. Now, you want to know, how do I want to Tuma you? There's a whole range of things that I'd like the women of our country to do. One, never keep quiet. Speak out about everything, from gender-based violence to the lack of, transformation in various structures, be it in business, be it in other structures. Never keep quiet. If you ever had sellotape on your mouth, take it out and speak out. That is the first thing that I say. Continue agitating for the attainment of a non-racist, a non-sexist South Africa. That is an important struggle that needs to be engaged on and fought for. So women must never sit back. And the more women talk, the more women, yes, even lobby, the more women even agitate and advocate and mobilize for the cause of women, the better South Africa will be. Because we know that the strength, the power of women is just overwhelming and overriding. And that is what we need South Africa to recognize, and the men of South Africa to recognize, that in the women of our country, we've got the best strength, because they've been held back, and we've never, as they say in Zulu, asiphelelanga with the absence of our women. We must all be there, and women play a much greater and a better role than the others who I will not name.
There's another element that does speak to the participation of women, Mr. President, and it does speak to the societal pressures that we also face. The mere fact that a woman is regarded as the primary caregiver for her children. It's been reported in various studies that this inequality when it comes to payment and the pay gap between men and women is exacerbated by childbearing, which in itself also adds more pressure in the competitive nature between women who choose to have children and those who don't. Now, there's a number of countries who have advanced in this particular policy, Rwanda and Iceland in particular, who have allowed both men and women to take paternity and maternity leave and changed the mindset regarding both parents being primary caregivers, which has thus increased the level of fair pay between those two genders. At what point in South Africa are we not only going to have this conversation, but see it being interpreted into policy and most importantly being implemented within the workspaces of South Africa?
Well, I would like us to get there as quickly as possible. And this is one other area where we want to hear the voices of women. This is where you need to raise your voices to a higher decibel. And you will find that there will be many others, including myself, who are going to join you and support that. So it is a policy process that we need to get engaged in. And I'd like to see us do that. Just as you started on this comment right now, I've just come back, and I'm sorry I ran a bit late, just came back from a meeting with Melinda Gates. We had Professor...
A common friend of yours of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation?
No, not even that, yes. No, she's here. Olive Shisana and my wife Tsepo and the Cyril Ramaphosa Foundation people met her. And she was here just to find out what I would like to do as the incoming chair of the AU, what I would like to focus on. And I said to her, obviously, as chair of the AU, I've got to focus on continental issues. For instance, silencing the guns is one, to make sure that we have peace on our continent. And of course, economic development. But then I told her that one of the areas I want to focus on is the empowerment of women. And she was delighted because she then said that they are going, as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, going to deploy $1 billion to empower women around the world. And I said, I want part of that money here in Africa.
Care to share the percentage?
So both Melinda Gates and myself were of common mind in terms of the empowerment of women. And I'm going to make it a huge program to be appropriated and to be embraced by the various presidents on the continent. We've got to move on with the empowerment of women and make sure that women are well empowered economically. And that is something that I'd like us to move on with. And Tsepo, my wife, wants to move on with the children aspect, to make sure that, early childhood development becomes the order of the day as well. So I think we're onto something very good here. We're going to be joined by global people. The President of France is also going to be part of this, and the Prime Minister of Canada. So together we're going to focus on the empowerment of women and make sure that we embark on programs. Now, this is where I am going to rely on the wisdom of the leaders and membership of the Businesswomen's Association that you are, because we need to strengthen and sharpen our own sort of understanding of what needs to be done on the continent, including the very issue that you raised, that women bear children, and quite often they are the ones who are lumped with the responsibility of bringing up children and all that. And we need to make sure that men also participate in a meaningful way and unleash the power of women to be able to be active economically.
We haven't mentioned them throughout this whole conversation, and you've often said you won't refer to that other party, but I'd like us to do so today. There's a scattering of a few gentlemen who've joined us here today, and you yourself, Mr. President, have generated and shown a great sense of chutzpah in the female participation of members of government as well as various ministries that you've appointed, and have really come forward as a true advocate for female participation in South Africa.
Yes.
The truth of the matter is that talk shops and conversations like this cannot happen in isolation with just women in the room. We do need more men on board. And what we've realized across the continent is that given the cultural dynamics, given the history that we have, that can at times be a challenge. What is your message to men out there to be part of the solution and also make a concerted effort to address many of the challenges that have been highlighted today?
Well, we've taken a conscious decision that even at the cabinet level, we're going to have parity. And we do have amongst the ministers 50-50. The deputy president and myself just mess it up by being men. That's a fault of our gender. Otherwise, we could have had a cabinet that's 50-50. But put that aside.
Are you looking to change that anytime soon, perhaps?
Well, I can't change my gender right now, can I? So we're looking forward to making sure that, and the governing party has also insisted on that. And this is a major development that's hardly ever noticed and talked of, that in the structures of our government, we've made sure that there is full empowerment, and where it is lacking, we bolster it with taking other initiatives. And we are going to be moving forward as a country in that direction completely. So we've taken the task of empowering women in decision-making structures very seriously. I want to see that happening in the corporate sector because it isn't happening as yet. So my call and my drive to mobilize men of our country is that we need in everything that we do, make sure that there is parity and make sure that we do in the end bring in the women to play a key role, and also ensure that in our succession planning we incorporate the empowerment of women. And it is possible to do that. And that's the message that I am spreading, and I want to spread more and more.
The support of one gender is not necessarily the isolation of another, but rather calling for collaborative efforts to take place.
Yeah, indeed.
I would like to get some feedback from the audience. Many of you have been sitting very anxiously and patiently to give us some of your feedback and raise your questions with the President here today. We will take questions in a series of 2. We do kindly request that you keep them as short and succinct as possible to allow for many more individuals to be able to address their questions on the floor. I haven't even said raise your hands. Are you ready, Mr. President? Are you ready, Mr. President? I think for the benefit of starting on this section of the room, and then we'll move on for the next 2 questions on this particular side. Ma'am, I saw your hand go up first, and we'll also come towards the front here. Ma'am, you're in the pink jacket towards the front. If the roving mics are available, if they could make their way speedily across. Perfect. Please introduce yourself, ma'am. Keep your question short, and then we'll move on to the second question and get responses from the President from there.
Thank you. And it's going to be very tough to keep it short because we don't get time to be with our President as often as we want to. Thank you, Mr. President, for coming this morning to indulge us. My name is Innocentia Motau, and I'm a maritime entrepreneur and a maritime economist. I am with MSC, the Mediterranean Shipping Company, which is the largest shipping line in the world. Second largest in the world, number 1 in South Africa, in containers. I'm also a partner in one of the subsidiaries. Now, Mr. President, I've got a short note for you, and indulge me. My business at MSC thrives because container throughput at our ports is not happening. My business is very volume driven, so meaning port productivity is sacrosanct to my business. As is currently, the port is no longer delivering productivity. 3 years ago, same people, same equipment gave us 25 moves an hour. We are at 6 moves an hour. 3 simple things of running a port: productivity, people, maintained equipment. State capture punished Transnet from a finance point of view, but we cannot suffer because of that, especially for workers, the workforce that's at the bottom, who are driving those cranes every day, Mr. President. It's not happening. But we're asking you, and we know you've been at the port a week and a half ago. You've put a big picture of this movie, and your minister is going to be there. You said you want to call the port every morning. You've indulged us, we've seen improvement, but it's not there anymore. Within 5 days, Transnet has given up and actually put down their laurels. So please, Mr. President, I want to thrive in the blue economy. If we want to see you at the port to come motivate the staff. The workforce is very demotivated. And Africa is catching up with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question, Innocentia. We'll come to the second question here, ma'am. If you could direct your question to the President and introduce yourself, we'll get responses and then come to this side of the audience for the next 2 questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Morning, Mr. President. My name is Boni Dibate. I work in the aviation sector, civil air navigation services system. It's the air traffic controllers. Now, my question, I've heard your beautiful presentation. You've given us plans of what you are going to do for us. You've also given us a bit of accountability. You're going to be signing compacts with the ministers. I have a business doing school uniform, manufacturing school uniform. For me, your performance contract with the minister is too high level. I'd like to know, as a woman in the street who is doing a simple manufacturing of school uniform, how do I access those support system that refinances as well as the business opportunities? Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you, ladies. We'll address those questions very shortly, Mr. President, if you could give us some feedback, motivation, and I think quite impressive as well that we need to recognize that we have women in various fields and industries here, maritime as well as aviation and manufacturing, really does speak to development taking place. But your response, Minister, excuse me, Mr. President.
Let's have more.
You'd like a few more?
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Let's come to the side of the crowd. We'll take 2 questions. Your hand has been noted, ma'am, where the microphone is. Your hand has also been noted, so the microphone will come to you. We'll endeavor to make sure that we get questions to everybody, ladies and gentlemen. So the shorter we keep it, the more questions we're able to get.
Good morning, Mr. President, and all the beautiful women here. My name is Nolubabalo Babsimcinga. I'm from the Eastern Cape in East London. My question to you, Mr. President, is to support my sister in the maritime and the oceans business. The oceans business is the biggest industry globally, but I don't see any women in there, and I don't see any talks on women in the maritime and oceans business. There is oil, there is gas, there is transport, there's pharmaceutical, minerals, no women. And I'm into entrepreneurial development, especially in my province. And there is no access for youth in the maritime industry. And how can you give access, Mr. President, for the youth and the women to be part of the opportunities that are in the oceans business? Because everything is international, even MSC is international. I don't think there's any boat or any ship that is South African and owned by a woman. I would like to be one of those women that will own a ship. But even for funding, it will be very difficult for me to have billions without the signature of my president here. So, Mr. President, I would love to be the first woman to own a ship with your signature, because I don't have billions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. If the microphone could make its way to... there we go. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Mr. President, my name is Natasha Moni. I am Natasha Moni. I am a labour law expert, a part-time commissioner at the CCMA and other bargaining councils. I've been an acting judge. I also go on radio and TV often to talk about workplace law, specifically sexual harassment in the workplace and bullying. You have many people around here who have experienced this. We have myself and a man you know very well, Kenny Mosime, and I run together sexual harassment litigation for and against, and we've been quite successful in that regard. Narisha Singh against Grant Thornton is one of them, and lately against Transnet, where the man who is running the ports, the man who is looking after the ports, had a false rape charge against him, actually 3, and we were able to, he was able to be found not guilty, and we were given costs. But what that happened is that they took a functional man who was a very, very good manager out of the system. And that is why your ports look like they are. Mr. President, you're not getting this. You're not getting this because people are playing political games in your state-owned enterprises. And I think that it's about time that you have feelers to the ladies on the ground who will tell you like it is, and who have, and I've been on TV, 404 I see is here, where I said to the lady who had stated that we should all sing Kumbaya around a fireplace, and that's how we're going to sort out the sexual harassment issues in SABC. I told her she was wrong. This is not how things are done. We have the laws speak loudly, they're clear, they're precise, they're concise. Why do we need all these forums to tell us that we must hold hands and teach each other how not to rape us, how not to touch us, and how not to be stupid about the woman that is sitting next to you? Workplace bullying is something that I see is very pervasive, and it hurts, and it hurts over a long period. Mr. President, please feel free to reach out to us. You know Kenny Musime, and we will give you our in-depth research and experience on this, because quite frankly, you're being lied to.
A valid point there, Natasha. I think perhaps, Mr. President, if we could get a response to those 4 questions, and then we'll take 2 more questions on this side. A microphone has already been allocated. A hand has been raised in the front together with others. But perhaps if you can address Natasha's point, followed by Nolubabalo, who's awaiting your signature to ownership. Bonnie, on the access as well to additional manufacturing support, how as a small player, she can also tap into larger opportunities that are available there, as well as Innocentia's point, who was also raised with regarding the enhanced participation of more women in the oceans economy.
Well, let me start off with Innocentia's point. Innocentia, I've been near the port. I haven't been to the actual port. And your articulation of the challenges there is obviously going to make sure that I do go to the site of the port. I would love to do that. Because, yes, it is. I've been really appalled at the lowering of productivity in our ports. And you've given more color to it by telling me that it used to be 25 moves an hour, now it is 6. That is horrible. And what I've also heard is that, other ports are becoming more and more attractive. Beira is becoming more attractive. Walfish Bay is being seen as attractive. And the various other ports around our country are just in decline. One of the people who spoke when I was in KZN said, they don't understand why, for instance, and I agreed with them, I don't understand why the headquarters of our port authority is in Johannesburg or Pretoria or wherever it is. It's in Parktown. The ports, there's no sea around Johannesburg. The last time I checked, I didn't see any sea. And it should be down there. And actually, they were being very serious. They were saying, the more it is down there, wherever it is, Cape Town, Port Elizabeth, East London, or, Richards Bay or Durban, that's when they will be able to see the malaise in our ports at close range. And what Natasha is also saying, obviously raises for me the issue even more prominently, that we do need good managers of our ports. And in the end, Innocentia, the point you raise is that state capture. State capture has been much more impactful than many of us actually see or believe it has been. It has actually reduced and debilitated the capability of the state, because Transnet, being a state agency, was also targeted, and good people who used to run those operations have either left or were forced to leave and have been pummeled into not being effective at all. And we therefore need to do a huge repair job. So what you've said has given me even more encouragement to go to the port and see exactly what's happening, because we've got to revamp our ports. Because otherwise, the economy of our country is going to be negatively affected. Because goods that come in and goods that have to go out go through our ports, and if we've now reduced from 25 moves an hour to 6, that's a catastrophic disaster, and we've got to put it right. So I will go to the ports. I hope you're there when I go there. Bonnie, aviation, I'm now interested in you because you say you're an air traffic controller. I fly a lot. And I often wonder about all these people who direct traffic. So you're one of them. But obviously you're talking about a different matter, about how one can get access to opportunities. And access to opportunities is something that all of us have to keep working on. And this also deals with the next question from Babsi on the oceans economy, who also says that there are no women in that oceans economy, and she wants to be part of the opportunities. She wants to get access to funding. And all those matters are matters where, as business people, and like it happens also in politics, you've got to work at it continuously. Because quite often in life, as you know, nothing will ever be given to you on a platter. You've got to go around and look for it and try and get it. I often say to people, you've got to kiss, as many frogs as you possibly can until you find your prince or your princess. But without actually diluting the importance of what you're raising, I'm saying the opportunities are there. Obviously, we've got to make them more accessible. We've got to make them more visible. We've got to make them even more transparent. Because quite often the opportunities are there and they are only available for certain people. We've got to make them more available to all the people. And if they are far and few and in between, you should know that if I wait in line, I will also get them, because there is transparency, there is availability, and there is access. So that is what we need to continue working on. Fortunately, we've got to work through the system, because the system has been so weakened and has been so, if you like, hijacked and captured just to look at certain interests. We've got to make sure that we break down those shackles and ensure that it is more universally available to all people. But I do want to say that individually, entrepreneurs must always be on their toes, looking out for those opportunities. But I want to add another aspect, an aspect that I think at times I find missing with us as South Africans who are now grasping the transformation process and the transformed environment. I think the other element we've got to add is being innovative and being creative. When the BEE process started, and I know it because I was part of it, when the BEE process started, it started off with a number of black people wanting to buy into existing businesses. And that was the key drive. We want to buy into this, we want to buy into that, we want to buy into that. And that, in my view, tended to blunt and to sort of, in a way, stop the creativity. We stopped being creative and sitting back and saying, how can we be more creative to a point where we can have creative destruction, be able to destroy what exists and to create the new, and to create new products, new markets, and new opportunities. I raise this because I think that is where the great opportunities are. If you go and look at Silicon Valley, what they did in Silicon Valley is to think outside the box. Many of those companies, they sat back and said, we can see what Microsoft has done. We are going to actually create different things. If not different things, we are going to create processes that Microsoft will find no other reason but to take up. So they created new ones rather than just to do copycatting. And quite often in our country, across the board, we copycat. And that is where, for instance, monopolies have grown stronger and stronger. And my take is that let us have in our minds and heads this creative, destructive approach, that we want to create new things that are going to compete with what already exists. And that is where a plethora of opportunities go. And then once you do that, funding also becomes a lot easier, Because you go to funders and say, I've got a new process, a new product, a new way of doing things, and funders then stand up. Now, I need to address Natasha's issue. My boss here is trying to stop me. Natasha, I know Kenny, and I know about you, and I really applaud the work that you guys have been doing. I really applaud it. I have recognized it, and I'd like to sit down with you and Kenny, who I know very well, so that I have a better insight into that whole process, the world where you guys are working, because it is there. Sexual harassment is a huge challenge, and it happens at various levels, even the highest levels in terms of offices. You find that it happens. And we've got to curb that. Just like gender-based violence, we've got to raise a new level of consciousness. And this is where I often say, we want the men of our country to respect the women of our country and treat them with dignity and honor and see them not as objects. Objects either for abuse, objects as toys. And that is what I would like to do to raise that level of consciousness. So I'm very delighted that we've connected, and maybe we can chat about it going forward.
I'd like to take 2 more questions as well from this side of the audience and another 2 here. Mr. President, you're going to have to help me decide. I think we'll take the hand at the back that's been raised by the... I beg your pardon? Perfect. We'll get there. On this side of the audience specifically, though, the question at the back will come to you, ma'am. And let's be nice enough and actually take a 3rd question. You've been very persistent, ma'am, with your hand up there in the middle with the pink jacket. You can go ahead with your question, ma'am. We'll come to the front and then go to the middle. We're coming back to you. Perfect. We will in just a moment, ma'am. You can go ahead with your question.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, ladies and the gentlemen, the few gentlemen that are here.
Oh, ignore them.
We like them, Mr. President. We need some testosterone from time to time. Okay. My name is Polo Leteka. I run a company called IDF Capital. And since inception around 2008, we've been focused primarily on investing in Black women-owned businesses, Mr. President. However, sadly, what we find is as we now go beyond the borders of South Africa and we're raising funds now, internationally as well, the world still doesn't understand women as an asset class. So I think South Africa was probably a pioneer in advancing the cause of the inclusion of women in the economy. Having said that, Mr. President, we still do have very limited access to capital as women in this country, and I think I would like to challenge you to make it a requirement going forward that our state-owned financing institutions actually have a specific allocation for the funding of women-owned businesses. I'm quite convinced that if we were to unpack the statistics of where the money is flowing, it is still flowing primarily towards male-owned businesses. My second challenge, Mr. President, is that I agree with you fully for us to start being innovative. We also run a technology accelerator at our firm. And the reason why we started running an accelerator is because we're getting approached by a lot of young Black entrepreneurs in the tech space with ideas, but with no seed funding, nothing. Again, it's my challenge to you, sir, to put our money where our mouths are as a government. The reason why Israel today is leading in the VC space is because it is the government of Israel that actually put up a challenge fund around 1992, and then it was a matching fund essentially where they put up, I can't remember how many millions of US dollars, hundreds of millions of US dollars, and they invited the private sector, and that's how that VC industry has been able to develop as well as it has. We can do that here in this country because we are not short of the capital.
Sure. Thank you so much for your question. There's a question with the lady in the mic in the front here. Go ahead with your question, ma'am. Then we'll come to the lady in the middle of the audience with the pink.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. President, all beautiful women who are here. Mr. President, Pemelo Maluleke, entrepreneur. I've been in training and development business for 17 years. Early this year in March, I got an allocation. We're talking about job creation here. I got an allocation to train 400 beneficiaries in Mpumalanga, educators and records and archives. We've been waiting for payment since March up until now, 9 months. Mr. President, like Natasha said, people are playing political minds with us. You sent in the invoice, there's red tape everywhere. We stopped training. 400 beneficiaries. My business is suffering. I had to let go of the staff because I've dipped into my pocket, to make sure that the staff are getting the salaries. But now in September, I had to let them go. And I've been listening in August, women empowerment, women who are suffering with payments. The others, they had to start from scratch. Building a business is not easy. It's been 17 years, my business is going down, only because of one person, internal politics. Can you maybe address that so that SMMEs cannot go on suffering, not getting payment within 30 days? This is the 9 months.
Thank you so much. We'll take one more question on this side of the audience. If the microphone can come forward. The microphone has gotten lost behind you. Go ahead with your question very briefly, ma'am. Mr. President, we're creating many enemies in the audience today. Frustrated, I'm not taking their questions. Apologies.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. President, I'm Kohaka Zinkuva from the former Transkei. I'm a rural girl. I'm representing the side of the world that cannot even express themselves in English. Firstly, I've been appointed by DHT. I'm in training and development as well. I'm a former teacher. I'm training SMMEs in the OR Tambo district. These SMEs have found out that they can't even access information because for them to go to the internet cafe, they have to take 2 taxis and pay plus minus 150. I'm talking about people based in Lusikisiki, some in Tsolo, some in Umbu. The problem with South Africans is that when they talk about development, they talk about people based in big cities. I want you to draw your attention. I'm going to give you my business card. I want us to be...
Thank you. I've been waiting.
I want us to be partners, my president, because I need funds to train those people. For example, I've trained them, 100 of them, the farmers, the South African women in construction, the youth, the women business owned by women in the OR Tambo. I'm passionate about rural development because I'm one of them. I know not having a street name and a number. I know how to struggle to write a proposal to get funding. So I want us to partner, and then we get funds to train those people. For example, the 100 that I've trained, in order for them to be part of the value chain of the economy of our country, they can't even have a computer and a printer. I want them to have a comfort in their rondavels where they stay, because at least there's electricity. Thank you to the ANC.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'll tell you what, we are under pressure for time, but we understand you very clearly on the partnership with government, access to financing and funding, and resources for entrepreneurs in the rural
Sorry. The problem is that, President, I want to have an appointment with you, to go to the former Transkei, to have something like this there. Because I have to book a flight, I have to book a hotel to come here.
Fair enough.
Can you please have an appointment with you? How do I get you access?
Fair enough. Thank you so much. We've got a question on this side of the audience, and then the microphone will come here. We'll also move towards the front. You can go ahead with your question, ma'am.
My name is Kenzani Ndlovu, and I'm from She's Me Camp. And I would like to ask why are condoms free, but we can't distribute pads for free, because there are children who can't.
Phone is right here in front. We'll take the next question. Please come to Kensani there. Thank you so much for your point.
I have a microphone. Can I speak?
There's a microphone that should be over here. Okay, let's direct the question here first, and we'll come to you, ma'am. Both of you have the microphones on standby. Please go ahead and keep it brief. We'll come to you at the back with the microphone. Apologies, ma'am. We already took quite a few questions this side, so we're trying to distribute them evenly. We'll give you an opportunity in just a moment. Please go ahead, ma'am, and keep it brief.
Good morning, Mr. President. No?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Nieleti Makobel, and I thought, let me stand up and also support the President, because I'm coming from government as well. I work for the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. So I'm not a business person, but I wanted to highlight to the ladies that are here that we do have a problem of transformation in the department. The late Dr. Ndlovu had done very well in lifting the women in construction. So she had reached the echelons of what a woman-led construction business could do. But we have a huge lack of women in property. The Department of Public Works started in around 2010, if I'm not mistaken, to implement what we call the 9-year 11 leases. So where if you're black, you can get a lease with government that is 9 years and 11 months long. It's a treasury thing, why it does not go beyond 10 years. But what then happens, a few black males came up, and it stopped. And we see them over and over and over again. They went on and did very well. Some listed their businesses, but there are no women. Ipeleng, I saw her somewhere here. Ipeleng tried, but it's not enough. We need to see more women. We need to see you women, what's that word? Group yourself, aggregate yourself, and let's go to the President. Let's open up those opportunities for the ladies so that the property sector can really transform. At the moment, it's not yet transformed, and I'm embarrassed to be sitting in there singing the transformation, but every time when we sign leases, we sign with more white people, more black guys, never ever the ladies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you take your question briefly, and then the microphone is there at the back. Then we'll have to get responses from the President too.
Good morning, Mr. President. Just a quick one. Reiterating what the lady said. Since you came into power, you've been talking about the payment of service providers. Yeah. It is still not happening. Yeah. You stand in the public podium all the time, and you say that service providers must be paid. I, for example, haven't been paid since November 2017 by a government institution. And when we raise this, that the presidency says we need to be paid in 30 days, it is go back to the president. We do not get help. We've kissed the frogs, as you said. We've done the work. We are creative. We fill in those SBD forms, as tiring and as elaborate as it is, but we still do not get paid after having done the work. So I don't know what it is that we need to do, because you say we need to get paid, we prove that we have worked, we submit the invoices, and we sit. She said we are providers. I am an alone provider. I'm not a single parent. I'm an alone parent. So I need to work to provide for my 2 kids. I then work, but I do not get paid by my own government. Thank you.
The last question that we'll take on the floor today before getting responses from the President due to time pressures. Tough one.
Mr. President, Tumamina.
Yes.
My name is Marissa Nell, and I'm a medical orthotist prosthetist. I work in the disability sector. Now, we have huge challenges with regards to service delivery to disabled people. Now, you have just emphasized today the importance of growing our manufacturing sector. We have been trying for 5 years to engage with government to implement a central fabrication plant that will create 200 jobs, provide assistance to NHI, and have the opportunity to export devices to the rest of Africa. My question is, when is it so challenging to secure meetings with government? What other alternative routes are there when we want to grow the manufacturing sector? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much for your questions, ladies and gentlemen. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of questions, and unfortunately we won't be able to get to them all, ladies and gentlemen, so don't hate the President. You can hate me for today. Mr. President, let's address some of those questions. Very pertinent issues being raised regarding access to capital as well as for financing. My apologies, ma'am. Unfortunately, I do understand that you've had your hand up as well as the microphone, but I'd also like us to appreciate the respect of the time of the many delegates who are here today. We will afford you an opportunity to address or direct your questions to Business Association of Women's Association of South Africa or any other parties. However, Mr. President, let me leave it to you. Would you like to take this last question? Go ahead,
Yes,
ma'am.
that's okay. Let's take it. Okay, let's take it. Let's take it.
Mr. President, you're speaking with Linda Matutu from Karare Girls, Africa. I'm going to talk about sexual harassment at workplace. Fortunately, I'm a victim of it, so that's why I couldn't put my hand down and let go of the opportunity that I'm getting. Mr. President, I've walked through this sexual harassment case from 2015 from a big company. And all the 4 years of unemployment that I've went through, my lawyer have gave me the verdict from the court that I'm gonna get is 3 options. First, to take the back pay of 4 years and go back to work, or to take the 4 years back pay and go part with the company, or the last one, to check where I want to work. I feel it's an insult for me, because not only this has affected me, myself, but my family and the women around me that they know, the women at workplace. So I want to plead to the government and to the mental organizations that we have. Can they work together? Can the perpetrator also be sentenced, a prison sentence, a harsh sentence? If the case has been through 4 years for so long, obviously the company knows. Can cases like that have a penalty for the company also, not to protecting women under their roof? That's all I'm asking. In 2 days, I'll be standing in court. It feels like an insult for me to go to labor court after 4 years not working, and the perpetrator is working. And everyone that was involved in it, being bullied at work, who not only being sexually harassed, but being victimized, beaten in front of the staff. That is extreme, to keep quiet and be silenced.
Thank you for your question, ma'am. Mr. President, you can go ahead and respond to the myriad of themes that have been addressed: access to sanitary ware, accountability when it comes to sexual harassment, and of course much harsher terms and conditions for the violators, and of course another element that was also highlighted regarding ensuring that there's additional capital for females in entrepreneurship in South Africa.
Well, thank you very much. Let me start off with Polo. It's sad to hear, and I mean that's confirmation of, I guess, what exists, that women are not seen as a viable asset class when it comes to business. And that is sad, and it's a matter that obviously needs to be addressed, and we've got to find creative ways of addressing it, and you've cited one of them. Having acknowledged the number of initiatives that we have taken in South Africa for the empowerment of women, particularly in business and all that. But your suggestion that, DFIs, development funding institutions, should have an allocation for supporting women-led businesses, I would support that. And I think that's a good idea, largely because, what we are finding, and this is the sad part, what we are finding with a number of development finance institutions is that they continue to fund the existing old club, if you like, male, and in a number of cases, white males, continue to be funded, and it seems like it happens happily so, and it shouldn't be. They should stop in their tracks and ask themselves, Why are we not being able to fund, say, women-led businesses or black-led businesses? So I support your view on this, because once you set up a sort of a limit or actually an allocation, you would then be able to get those development funding institutions to set up and go out, look out for businesses that also could be funded, because there are many of them. And seed funding, the issue that you raise is one of those. But I'm interested in this one that you talk about in Israel, because one knows about what exists, say, for instance, in other countries in the US, but in the Israeli one, where it funds, enterprises in tech, in the technology space, and you call it a challenge fund. For me, that is a very interesting nomenclature to say it's a challenge fund, because it possibly could challenge the private sector, but it could also challenge the entrepreneurs themselves that come out of the woodworks. Here is money, come with plans and innovative ideas which we can fund, and then we can seed your business. Because in many ways, that is what I guess has gotten Israel to lead in the technology space. They are leading by leaps and bounds, and they are actually innovative in a number of sectors of the economy, in agriculture, in maritime, and in a number of other areas. They have shown that they can lead, and we can learn a lot from what they do with challenge funds. So I find this very, very interesting, and I'd like to know more, Polo. So if we can discuss that. My sister, Malulek and my other sister have raised the issue of SME payment. This is a painful one, a very painful one, because we keep hearing, and the stories just keep spreading, and they get much more harrowing and painful about how people get into business to either provide a service or products to government, and in the end they don't get paid. But the worst part is the impact that it has not only on their businesses but on the workers that they have employed. Because it means that we as government are contributing to unemployment. Precisely, the process or the objective that we say we want to address, that there should be employment, and some official down the chain there, for either other reasons, political or whatever, then puts the brakes, and then it results in unemployment. Now, we've been talking about this, and I know that former Minister Jeff Radebe was making quite a lot of progress in lighting, shining a light on payment within 30 days and so forth. It keeps slipping. Sometimes it slips. Gauteng, for instance, I know, have testified to the fact that they have been paying more and more on a 30-day basis, and one or two other provinces. Now, where there are stories like what you, my sisters, are telling, it is worrying and harrowing, because whatever the reason could be, they should tell you the reason in a satisfactory manner why they won't pay you, and you should be satisfied. And the fact that you are not satisfied means that there is a problem. And the problem is politics are being played, and we need to get to the bottom of this. Now, I'd like to solve this, and I've been giving quite a lot of thought to it, and I'd like to find a way of addressing it. It will be easy to say, there's a telephone number that you can phone to the presidency, and we unlock all this. It's one of the ways possibly we could do. I need to give it a little bit more thought, so that it's not a toy telephone. No, I don't want to create a toy telephone. I want to create a system, because this worries me. As a person who was in business and failed, I don't think people should fail for not being paid. we should find a much more effective way. And we will come up with a more effective way to make sure that we deal with this issue and deal with it effectively. In the presidency, we are setting up structures that are going to be problem solvers, where we solve problems as quickly as possible. And this is what people expect of a presidency. And therefore, I want to find a way in which we can set a problem-solving entity within the presidency that will solve problems and not just give a promise. So that when the presidency descends on you, whether you are a secretary at the bottom, you should never have to say, the president, we should descend on you and solve the problem. So we'll come up with a solution. Okay. So be rest assured we will address it. Here's a solution. What's the solution?
Don't pay the government's workers' salaries is what she's suggesting in order to ensure that you can pay the suppliers.
We've looked at things like that.
So the solution is technology.
I can hear you.
The president can hear you, audible.
So my name is Prudence Mabitsela. I'm the managing director and co-founder of Dynamic DNA. Dynamic DNA, I'm 29 years of age. I started it 4 years ago. And we train and develop the youth to become technology leaders. So unemployed youth, we take them onto scarce skills roles within technology. So I would say we can create an application for you, utilizing those unemployed youth, that will talk to all departments within your organization, and you can be able to track progress utilizing technology, and everyone could be able to interact with presidency at that level. So I would say we should be speaking in that level, and this is where we're starting to integrate unemployed youth into entrepreneurship as well. Dynamic
Thank you so
DNA.
much for your feedback as well as the solution.
I like that. And that's why this type of forum is very good, so we come up with good ideas.
I think 2 more points to wrap up on, Mr. President.
Okay,
Entrepreneurship development, and Ken Sani's question regarding the free availability of sanitary wear for females and young schoolgirls.
The boss is spoken. Gohakazi, my sister from former Transkei, complaining about the lack of access to facilities and so on in the rural areas. We're very alive to that, extremely alive. And in a way, you're citing an area that we went to recently, where through the district development model that we are building, we're seeking to address the problems at the district level so that somebody who is in Lusikisiki does not need to go to Mtata. Somebody who is Bizana does not need to go to Mtata, but will, within that district, be able to find all this. We want to create even innovation hubs, including business innovation centers in the area, in the OR Tambo district, so that easier access can be there. And I'm happy when I next go, by the way, when I next go to OR Tambo, I will be very happy to have an occasion like this, a dialogue like this. We did have it with women, and it was a very successful one because we were dealing with gender-based violence issues, and they spoke their hearts out. And I want to have a business-oriented one, and we'll pick on you to be one of the people who helps us to organize that. But when it comes to training, I want you to continue doing that and to hook up with us as well through the Small Business Development Ministry, so that we can support you in the work that you are doing. So we will do that. Thank you. Now, Kentani raises an issue which has been raised by young people. The ANC Youth League were one of the first who raised this about free pads to young girls in school, and they've raised a campaign which has been taken up by a number of entities, including Minister Maite Mashabani's ministry. They have taken it up. We have moved Kensani, beyond saying supply free condoms only and don't do anything about pads for young girls. The issue is a huge budgetary one, which we are trying to address within government. The good thing is that a number of departments in government have already started moving on this. The Ministry of Women and Youth and people who are disabled has started moving in this. And we obviously will want with time, where's Kensani? With time, we want to scale this up. We will be addressing that issue. It's taking place in pockets. NGOs are doing it, and to some extent, some of our government departments, to a limited extent, are doing it. It needs to be scaled up so that you as a young girl will know that as a matter of fact and operation, these things can be available. So you don't have too long to wait. We are addressing it, and we will address it effectively. But thank you very much for raising it and for being brave to raise it in the way that you have. And thank you very much for being here to be part of the dialogue that the women of our country are having here. I applaud you, young lady.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Nyeleti, no,
One more element.
Yeah, Nyeleti. It is Nyeleti, isn't it? The last one who spoke.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, this is. What is her name? Oh, no. Then there was there was Nell about service delivery to disabled people. This is something that does need to be addressed. Our manufacturing assistance program should be able to give assistance. And I would say that our Black Industrialist program, which is there, which supports, startups like this, should be able to give you assistance. And I would say, please approach the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, because I'm rather interested in what you have raised, and we'll also want them to follow up. Nyeleti had raised the issue, and I just wrote here, women need to search forward, they need to be innovative, and I may have missed the full gist, but it is about this whole issue I was talking about innovation, about being creative, and about women demonstrating their courage, their talent, and their innovativeness to move forward, to come up with new processes and new ways of doing things. Linda Elwa, the last one about sexual harassment, and she would like to see the improvement of the criminal justice system when it comes to dealing with perpetrators. I couldn't agree with you more, even on sexual harassment cases, because that is a form of abuse, and it is actually abuse. We do need to shine a light on this, and it is actually very worrying that, in a number of places there is protection for men who abuse women, who harass women sexually, and who try to get women to agree to things that they would ordinarily not agree to. So I agree with you, and obviously the criminal justice system needs to be responsive to the pain and the trauma that women go through. I am particularly touched and worried about the fact that you've had to wait for 4 years before the type of case which is really painful has been brought to light, either to the labor court or wherever, and that in the end you are being subjected to an insult, like, agree to this, agree to that, and yet the person who perpetrated this is still in their place and still in their position. That is what is worrying. But we do need, as you've suggested, to strengthen our criminal justice system so that they can actually be sanctioned. And maybe if need be, yes, even to companies that protect perpetrators like you have suggested. So I couldn't agree more. The pain of our women is something that needs to be addressed more effectively, possibly than we are doing now. And the fact that women of our country are brave enough, including those who have suffered at the hand of perpetrators, are brave enough to stand up and articulate this point is something that we should really applaud and be thankful for. Because the more we hear, the more women speak out, the more they search forward, the more we are then able as a nation to address this matter. Because if we don't hear about these matters, then we are none the wiser and none the better. So we need to hear so that we can come up with policies and interventions that can address precisely your case. But then again, Lindelwa, thank you very much for raising it. I applaud your courage because it's a very painful one, and wish you strength as you go on with this. But also we need to make a lot of repairs in our own systems. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, we're appreciative of the feedback that you've been able to provide, especially as we continue to dialogue and get insight as to what the audience is concerned about. And we're wrapping it up in really trying to get commitments. You're 5 months into a 5-year tenure, and fundamentally we can deduce many of the factors that the audience would like to have addressed, being access to capital, payment of businesses on time, and of course a change in the criminal justice system to ensure that there's safety and security for South African women in this country. Can you make commitments that during your tenure, these 3 fundamental elements, among many others, will be part of your primary objective to attain and achieve further developments in South Africa?
The support of women is, for me, an overriding agenda and objective. Slightly more than 50% of the population of our country consists of women. We have no other choice. No other choice, even if we could have said we don't want to address it. You cannot move forward as a nation by just addressing just the one side. I mean, we've got to distinguish ourselves from the past rulers of this country. What they did in the apartheid days was to have a deformed economy by just focusing on a minority, white people and white men for that matter, who ran and drove the economy of our country. And I often say that is in part why our economy, because it was blunted by these policies, has not been able to emerge as a huge economy that pumps and that operates at a higher level. So we've got to depart from that. We've got to make sure that all the people in our country become part of the economic activity in our country. It cannot be men only. It must include women. Women have forever been relegated to the past, and I'm committed to ensuring that we get more and more women participating. We're seeing it in education, which is great, and I'm seeing it here as well, with many women running their businesses, and we want to see more and more. And therefore, we want to remove all the obstacles. We want to remove all the constraints that hold you back from being successful in running your businesses and being successful participants in the economy. And secondly, we do want, this is important, secondly, we do want the women of our country to be sure that they are not living in a country that has declared war against them. And that for me is important. The women of our country must know that their rights are promoted, they are protected, and they are advanced as women and as citizens of this country. That South Africa will seek to create a country in which women can be safe, in which women can live with dignity, and in which women will not be humiliated by being subjected to rape, to killings, and to violence. And that is important. And I'd like this to seep into the psyche of our nation, that we've got to respect the women of our country, because they don't only bring life into the world, but they sustain life. They are the ones who support families. Families are what they are today, whether it's single-headed family or not. They are supported by women. So women play a key and critical role, and we've got to make sure that women play that role and they have the right to be themselves, and their identity should never, ever be downtrodden. So those commitments I'm prepared to make and say, I want to promote the well-being of women in our country and would like to direct every program that we do in government towards precisely that. And this I am prepared and willing to say very openly and say that is what is going to drive my presidency to make sure that we empower you as the women of our country. Thank you very much.
I think key points that have certainly been highlighted, and we appreciate and acknowledge those commitments, Mr. President, as we always do as a democratic South African citizens who are present here in the room. We will ensure that we hold you accountable to these efforts, but at the same time work with you through collaborative efforts to ensure that we attain them for the greater good of South African society. With that said, it is unfortunate that we are no longer able to take any questions, but one thing that the President has made certain through his government representatives who are also here today is that there are ongoing avenues and opportunities for further engagement to take place. So it doesn't end here. Even with your participation through the Businesswomen's Association, you can continue to engage and channel your messaging to the right individuals and institutions. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, such a pleasure engaging with you, Mr. President. We appreciate your efforts and for acknowledging and spending your time with a wonderful woman of South Africa today who will themselves also take this messaging forward. As we rise, ladies and gentlemen, please let us acknowledge and, of course, thank once more the President of South Africa, His Excellency, President Ramaphosa.
Gugu Mfupi there, a business and economics journalist, very ably leading that presidential dialogue with the Businesswomen's Association of South Africa, an organization that has done amazing work in mobilizing the cause of women in business in South Africa.
You cannot move forward as a nation if you don't address the issues that are affecting women. That's
Absolutely.
what the President has
a conversation there about the inclusion and the participation of women in business in South Africa. And some amazing comments and women in amazing places in South Africa, but a tweet that came through saying, where are the domestic workers, where are the women in business in townships? And I suppose that's a valid point.
And one of the speakers there was actually inviting the President to go to rural areas, for instance, and have similar dialogues and understand the issues, grassroots issues as well.
An amazing initiative nonetheless.
Definitely. The President did mention that, we're living in some challenging times and we need to look out for certain opportunities. And some of these opportunities needs to infuse confidence in this country and see what works for us. And these are policy issues, these are structural issues, process issues that we need to take
But also the former president of the Businesswomen's Association, Basetsana Khumalo, saying, the President, you've made a call for us to Tumamina. What can we do? We are ready. And the President saying in response that never keep quiet, speak out about everything, be it gender-based violence or lack of transformation. Continue agitating for the attainment of a non-racist and a non-sexist South Africa.
The economy of South Africa, an important thread that ran through the whole dialogue. And you're going to be in conversation with someone to discuss
Absolutely.
this further.
We're going to take a break now, but when we return, we're talking to Dr. Samuel Goma, who's with the Mill Park Business School, to talk about what to expect in this very sluggish economy, what to expect Finance Minister Dito Mboweni to bring out of his hat.
Important conversation. That's next.